Behind her, footsteps echoed on the marble floor, heavy, familiar. Lord Alistair Blackthorne entered without knocking, as he always did, as if every inch of this house bent to his will, including her. "You're still here," he said, voice flat, as though her presence were an inconvenience. Eleanor didn't turn. "It's my home too, Alistair," he scoffed, pouring himself a glass of whiskey from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. "Is it? Or is it just the place you manage while I build something real?" She finally faced him. His tailored suit, his perfectly combed hair, the faint scent of another woman's perfume clinging to his collar, subtle but unmistakable. Her chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I've managed more than this house. I've managed your debts, your reputation, your father's crumbling legacy. While you were off building something real, I was the one keeping the lights on." Alistair's eyes narrowed. "Don't flatter yourself. You were never more than a dutiful wife. Quiet, obedient. That was the arrangement. Obedient." A bitter laugh escaped her. "You married me for my family's connections, then acted as if I were furniture. Present, polished, but never seen. And now you bring her here, into our bedroom, into my study, as if I wouldn't notice." He set the glass down hard. "Clara sees me. She doesn't dissect my every move like you do. She doesn't keep ledgers of my failures. Clara is 23, Alistair. She doesn't know what failure is yet." Eleanor stepped closer, her voice trembling not with fear, but with a grief so deep it felt like drowning. "I loved you when your father disowned you. I stood by you when the board called you reckless. I held your hand through your brother's funeral when you couldn't cry. And this is how you repay loyalty? With silence? With betrayal?" For a moment, just a heartbeat, he looked away. Guilt flickered in his eyes, but pride was faster. "Maybe loyalty isn't enough," he said quietly. "Maybe I need someone who makes me feel alive." Eleanor's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to shatter the glass in her hands. But instead, she straightened her spine, smoothed her dress, and met his gaze with a calm that terrified even her. "Then go," she whispered. "Go to her. But know this, when you realize she only loves the idea of you, not the man beneath the title. Don't come back expecting me to be waiting." Alistair hesitated. Then, with a curt nod, he turned and walked out. The front door clicked shut behind him. Alone again, Eleanor sank into the velvet armchair by the fire. Cold now, like everything else. She pressed her palm to her chest, as if she could hold her heart together with her own hands. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture in the foundation of a life she'd believed in. She didn't cry, not yet, because somewhere beneath the hurt, a spark had ignited, not of anger, but of clarity. This house, this name, this life, they had never truly been hers. But maybe, just maybe, they could be. And if not, she would build something that was. But ambition is a hungry thing, and Alistair fed it with everything he had, including her. Now, the dining table stretched between them like a battlefield. Silver cutlery gleamed under chandeliers that cost more than most families earned in a decade. Yet the silence was louder than any argument. "You didn't attend the charity gala?" Alistair remarked, not looking up from his roast pheasant. "I was finalizing the quarterly reports for the vineyard," Eleanor replied, voice even, though her fingers tightened around her fork. "The one you forgot we owned until the bank called." He finally met her eyes. "Must you always remind me of what I've neglected? Must you always neglect it?" She countered, softer now. "Alistair, we used to talk about everything. Now, I hear about your new acquisitions from the Financial Times before I hear them from you." He set his knife down with a sharp clink. "You want me to come home and recite balance sheets? Is that what love is to you now? Accountability?" "No," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. "Love is showing up, not just with gifts or titles, but with yourself, your presence, your honesty." She leaned forward, eyes glistening. "When was the last time you asked how I was? Not the estate manager, not Lady Blackthorne. Just Eleanor. He looked away, toward the portrait of his father above the fireplace. Stern, unsmiling, eternal. You knew what this life demanded when you married me. Did I? She let out a breath that carried 5 years of swallowed words. I thought I was marrying a man who believed partnership meant sharing burdens, not assigning them. You used to say I was your equal. And I still do, he said quickly. But it rang hollow. Then why, she whispered, do I feel like your employee? A long silence settled, thick with everything unsaid. Outside, wind rattled the ivy against the windows. Somewhere in the east wing, a clock chimed 9. Alistair stood abruptly, adjusting his cufflinks. I have a meeting with Clara tomorrow. She's drafting the new acquisition proposal for the London portfolio. Eleanor froze. Clara. The name had been slipping into their conversations like a slow poison. First as, my new assistant. Then Clara thinks we should expand. Now Clara and I. She's been with you less than a year, Eleanor said, keeping her tone neutral, though her stomach twisted. And already she's shaping your legacy. She sees potential, he said, avoiding her gaze. She doesn't dwell on the past. And I do. You live in it, he snapped, then instantly regretted it. He softened, but not enough. Eleanor, I'm not blaming you, but this marriage, it's become a performance. Polite, perfect, empty. Her heart cracked, not with rage, but with recognition. He wasn't wrong. They had become actors in a play written by expectation, not desire. But emptiness, she realized, wasn't her fault alone. She stood slowly, smoothing her dress, the same shade of navy she always wore to board meetings, because Alistair once said it made her look serious, not sentimental. Then perhaps, she said, voice steady despite the storm inside, you should find someone who doesn't remind you of what you've lost, but who makes you forget you ever had it. He stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time in years, not as his wife, not as his shadow, but as a woman who had loved him fiercely, quietly, and completely, and who was now slipping through his fingers like smoke. I never wanted to hurt you, he murmured. But you did, she replied. Every day you chose silence over truth, distance over closeness. You hurt me, and you never even noticed. She turned and walked out, not in anger, but in sorrow. Good morning, Lady Blackthorne, Clara said without looking up, voice honeyed with false deference. Lord Blackthorne asked me to review the Singapore holdings. He says you've been overwhelmed lately. Eleanor didn't flinch. She stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind her like a warning. He didn't tell me that. Clara finally glanced up, eyes glinting with something between challenge and amusement. Well, he tells me everything. She smiled, a small practice thing designed to sting. You know how it is. When someone finally sees you, you don't hold back. The words landed like shards of glass in Eleanor's chest. But she kept her posture straight, her voice calm. And what exactly does he see in you, Clara? Your spreadsheets? Or your willingness to sit in his lap during strategy meetings? Clara's smile faltered, just for a second. Then she stood, smoothing her blouse. I see a man drowning in legacy and regret, and I offer him a future, not a museum. A future built on what? Eleanor asked, stepping closer. On lies? On the slow erasure of the woman who held him together when his world collapsed. I'm not erasing you, Clara said, voice dropping, almost pitying. I'm just replacing what's broken. The air thickened. Outside, a raven cawed from the garden oak, the same tree where Alistair had once proposed, kneeling in the rain. Now that memory felt like someone else's dream. Eleanor's hands trembled, but not from fear. From fury so deep it burned clean. You think this is about jealousy? That I'm some discarded wife weeping into her pearls? She let out a quiet, chilling laugh. No, Clara, I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid for you. Because when Alistair realizes you don't love him, you love the power he represents. He'll discard you faster than he did me. And you won't have a home to return to. Clara's confidence wavered. She crossed her arms, defensive now. At least I won't spend my life waiting for a man to notice me. Oh, I stopped waiting a long time ago, Eleanor said softly. I just stayed out of habit, out of hope. But hope isn't a strategy. She turned toward the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. And neither is seduction. Clara gathered her files, but paused at the door. He's filing for separation next week, she said, not looking back. Said it's time to simplify his life. Eleanor didn't respond. She just watched the woman leave, heels clicking like a countdown. Alone again, she walked to Alistair's desk, the one she'd chosen for him when they renovated the West Wing. Her fingers brushed the leather blotter, then froze. Beneath it, half hidden, was a photograph. Her and Alistair, 10 years younger, laughing on a beach in Santorini. She'd forgotten they'd ever looked that happy. But tucked behind it, newer, crisper, a selfie. Clara leaning into Alistair's shoulder, both of them grinning at some private joke. On the back, in his handwriting, "Finally, someone who understands me." The words didn't wound her. They clarified her. That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat at her own desk in the East Wing, the one no one ever visited, and opened a locked drawer. Inside lay documents, property deeds, offshore account statements, and a letter from a discreet law firm in Geneva. Years ago, after his brother's death, Alistair had signed emergency powers of attorney in her name, just in case, he'd said. He'd forgotten. She hadn't. She picked up the phone, dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Sebastian? It's Eleanor. Pause. Rain began again outside, soft at first, then insistent. I need you to activate Protocol Viridian. Yes, all of it. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble, because the woman who cried over betrayal was gone. In her place stood someone who understood. Love had failed her. But power never forgets who holds the keys. She was halfway to the door when his voice cut through the marble hall like a blade. Leaving so quietly? Alistair stood at the top of the staircase, robe untied, eyes bloodshot. Clara lingered behind him in the shadows, arms crossed, lips curled in quiet triumph. Eleanor didn't turn. I thought you'd prefer it this way. No scene, no tears. You think I wanted you to leave? He said, descending slowly, each step echoing. I wanted you to understand, to step aside gracefully. She finally faced him. Gracefully? You brought your mistress into our home, whispered your future plans in rooms I decorated, slept in the bed where we buried our miscarriage, and you expect me to step aside gracefully? Clara stepped forward. No one's asking you to grovel, Eleanor. Just disappear. You've had your time. Eleanor's gaze flicked to her, cold and steady. And you think yours will last? He'll tire of your ambition the moment it stops serving him. Enough, Alistair snapped. He stood before her now, close enough that she could smell whiskey and Clara's perfume on his skin. This is over. Sign the separation papers. Walk away with dignity, or I'll make sure you get nothing. For the first time, Eleanor laughed. A raw, broken sound that startled even her. Nothing? Alistair, you've already given me nothing. For years, the only thing I ever truly owned was my silence. And I'm done giving that away. She turned to go, but he grabbed her wrist hard. Don't make this ugly. She yanked free, eyes blazing. You made it ugly the moment you chose her over us. Over me. You didn't just betray my love. You betrayed every late night I spent saving your name, every lie I told to protect your pride. And for what? A girl who sees you as a stepping stone. Clara hissed. You're pathetic. No, Eleanor said, voice dropping to a whisper that carried through the entire hall. I'm awake. She walked to the door, opened it. Rain poured in, soaking the hem of her coat. Alistair called after her, voice cracking. Where will you go? You have no income, no connections outside this life. Eleanor paused on the threshold. Back to him, rain dripping from her hair. Funny, she said softly. I always thought you were my life, but maybe I was just waiting to remember I had my own. And with that, she stepped into the storm. Behind her, the door slammed shut. Not by her hand, but by his. A finality that echoed like a tomb ceiling. She didn't look back. The town car she'd called idled at the gate. The driver, an old friend from university, opened the door without a word. As she slid inside, soaked and shaking, she pressed her forehead to the cool window. Inside the manor, lights flickered in the east wing, her wing. Soon they'd pack it away, erase her, make room for Clara's modern art and louder laughter. But Eleanor wasn't thinking about that. She was thinking about Geneva, about Sebastian's reply that morning. All assets are ready. The transfer triggers in 72 hours. She closed her eyes. Let them celebrate. Let them toast to new beginnings in her dining room, on her china, beneath her chandeliers. Because in 3 days, none of it would belong to Alistair Blackthorne anymore. And when she returned, and she would return, it wouldn't be as the discarded wife. It would be as the owner. The car turned onto the main road, leaving Blackthorne Manor shrinking in the rearview mirror like a bad dream. But dear God, you look like a ghost, she whispered, pulling her inside without hesitation. Eleanor collapsed into her arms, finally letting the dam break. Sobs racked her body, silent at first, then deep, guttural cries that had been locked away for years. She hadn't cried when Alistair kissed Clara in the garden. She hadn't cried when he handed her the separation papers with a cold, "For your own good." But here, in the arms of the one friend who'd warned her from the start, the grief tore through her like a blade. "He threw me out like I was nothing," she choked out, soaked and shivering in Mara's hallway. "You were never nothing," Mara said fiercely, guiding her to the sofa and wrapping her in a thick wool blanket. "You were everything to that house, to that legacy." And he was too blind to see it. Eleanor stared at her hands, still trembling, still clean, still empty. "I gave him my youth, my name, my silence." And he handed it all to her like it was spare change. Mara handed her a steaming mug of tea. "Then let him choke on what he's chosen." But Eleanor shook her head. "It's not about revenge, Mara. It's about not disappearing. Not letting him rewrite our story like I was just a footnote." Mara sat beside her, voice softening. "What will you do?" Eleanor looked up, eyes red but sharp. "I'll survive. Then I'll return." Mara frowned. "He'll fight you. Legally, socially. He'll drag your name through the mud." "Let him," Eleanor said, a quiet fire kindling in her voice. "Because while he was parading Clara through boardrooms, I was the one who kept his empire from crumbling. And he never even noticed." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a slim folder, water-stained but intact. Inside, bank statements, property valuations, and a single sheet marked Blackthorne Holdings. Emergency contingency. Mara's eyes widened. "Is that?" "The keys to the kingdom," Eleanor whispered. "Signed by him in 2018, after his brother's overdose. He gave me full fiduciary authority in case of mental incapacity or financial emergency. He thought it was temporary, a formality." She let out a bitter laugh. "He forgot I never file anything away without reading the fine print." Mara leaned forward. "You're going to take it all back." "I'm going to take it all," Eleanor corrected, "because none of it was ever really his. It was built on my father's loans, my negotiations, my sleepless nights. Alistair just wore the crown." Outside, thunder rumbled. Mara squeezed her hand. "You'll need allies, witnesses, proof that Clara's been manipulating him." "I already have it," Eleanor said. "She's been funneling money into offshore accounts under her cousin's name. I found the transfers last month. I didn't say anything then, but I kept copies." Mara stared at her, awe and fear mixing in her eyes. "You've been planning this?" "No," Eleanor said softly. "I've been preparing. There's a difference." She stood, walking to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain. Somewhere, miles away, Alistair was probably pouring champagne with Clara, celebrating his fresh start. But fresh starts don't last when the foundation is built on sand. And Eleanor? She was bedrock. She turned back to Mara, voice steady now. resolute. I need you to call Sebastian in Geneva. Tell him to initiate phase 2. And contact the lead creditor on the Blackthorn mortgage, Mrs. Langley. She's owed £14 million. She'll listen to me. Mara nodded, already reaching for her phone. Eleanor sank back onto the sofa, exhaustion crashing over her again. But beneath it, something new. Purpose. She wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a force regrouping. And in 3 days, when the legal notices landed on Alistair's desk, he wouldn't see it as betrayal. He'd see it as justice. Wrapped in a blanket, in a borrowed home, Eleanor closed her eyes. Not to sleep, but to plan. Because the woman who left Blackthorn Manor in the rain, she wasn't running away. Eleanor slid a folder across the table. The Blackthorn estate is technically insolvent. The vineyards in Tuscany, sold last year, proceeds vanished into a shell company Clara registered in Cyprus. The London portfolio, over-leveraged. And the mansion, she paused, letting the weight settle, fully mortgaged to your firm, with a clause that triggers immediate recall if ownership structure changes, or if the primary guarantor is deemed unreliable. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed. And you know this how? Because I signed every refinancing agreement, Eleanor said quietly. While Alistair was too busy charming investors, I was the one meeting your auditors. I know where every pound went. And more importantly, I know where it didn't go. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. He thinks the mansion is his birthright, but legally, it's collateral. And if you call the loan, and you should, given the undisclosed liabilities, he loses it all by Friday. Mrs. Langley studied her for a long moment. You could have walked away, taken a settlement, disappeared. I did disappear, Eleanor said, a flicker of pain in her eyes, for 48 hours. But then I remembered this isn't just about him. It's about every woman who's been erased from a story she helped write. Every wife told to be quiet while her husband hands her life to someone younger, louder, hungrier. She met Mrs. Langley's gaze. You lost your husband to a mistress, didn't you? The older woman stiffened, then sighed. 30 years ago, she got the penthouse. I got the debt and the shame. Then you understand, Eleanor said gently. This isn't revenge. It's reclamation. Mrs. Langley closed the folder. I'll call the loan, effective tomorrow. But Eleanor, she reached across and touched her hand. Be careful. Men like Alistair don't surrender. They burn everything down with them. That night, back at Mara's, Eleanor received a text from Sebastian. Transfer complete. Title to Blackthorn Manor now held by Viridian Trust. Beneficiary E. Blackthorn. Sealed. Alistair's name removed from all primary deeds. He doesn't know yet. She stared at the message, heart pounding not with triumph, but with dread. Because now came the hardest part, waiting. The next morning, she woke to headlines. Blackthorn Empire in crisis. Creditors circle as mansion faces foreclosure. By noon, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Eleanor. Alistair's voice. Hoarse. Frantic. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Alistair, she said calmly. You did this. Every bad deal, every secret account, every lie to your creditors. That was all you. Don't play innocent. You're behind this. Langley wouldn't move without your whisper in her ear. Maybe she finally saw what I've known for years. You're not a titan. You're a house of cards. Silence. Then quieter. Please, just talk to me. We can fix this. Fix it. Eleanor's voice cracked. You threw me out in the rain and called it simplifying your life. Now you want me to save you. I was wrong, he whispered. About everything. She closed her eyes. Part of her wanted to believe him. The part that still remembered his hand in hers on their wedding day. But the woman she was now knew better. Then fix it yourself, she said. Without me. Without Clara. Just you. She hung up. Outside, the sky cleared for the first time in days. And Eleanor understood. The storm wasn't over. It was just changing direction. Because tomorrow, the foreclosure notice would land. And she didn't knock. She rang the bell. Inside, muffled voices, laughter, Clara's, bright and careless. Then footsteps. The door swung open. Alistair froze. He looked older, unshaven, his shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. Behind him, Clara appeared in the hallway, silk robe slipping off one shoulder. Holding a coffee cup like this was just another lazy morning in their home. "Eleanor," Alistair breathed, voice raw. "What are you?" She stepped past him without permission, heels clicking on the marble like a judge entering a courtroom. The house smelled the same, old wood, bergamot, the faint trace of her lavender sachets still tucked in the drapes. But everything felt wrong, foreign, like walking into a museum exhibit of your own life. "Where's Mrs. Langley's notice?" Eleanor asked, glancing at the side table where mail was always sorted. Alistair shut the door slowly, stunned. "You can't just—" "I can," she said, turning to face them both. "Because as of 9:03 a.m. today, I am the legal owner of this property." Silence. Clara laughed. A sharp, nervous sound. "Don't be dramatic. Alistair owns this estate. It's been in his family for 4 generations," Eleanor finished calmly. "And now it's mine, through the Viridian Trust. Fully paid, fully transferred. The mortgage was called, the debt settled, in full, by an anonymous buyer. Guess who that was?" Alistair's face went pale. You bought it?" "I didn't buy it," she corrected, voice steady, eyes blazing. "I reclaimed it. Every ledger I signed, every emergency clause I preserved, every silent hour I spent keeping this house from collapse. It all led here. You thought I was just managing your life, Alistair, but I was building my own safety net. And you walked right off the edge." Clara dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor. "This is insane. You can't just—" "I already did." Eleanor turned to her, cold and precise. "Your lease expired the moment Alistair lost ownership. Which means, Clara, you're trespassing." Clara's bravado cracked. "He'll fight this. We'll sue you." "Sue me for what?" Eleanor asked softly. "For using the legal authority he gave me? For paying off a debt he ignored? Go ahead. But while you're drafting your lawsuit, pack your things. You have 1 hour." Alistair stepped forward, hands raised. "Eleanor, please, talk to me. Not like this. Not in front of—" "In front of her." Eleanor's voice broke, just once. "You made sure I was alone when you threw me out. No witnesses, no dignity, just rain and silence. So no, don't ask me for privacy now. You lost that right." She walked to the fireplace where the family crest still hung. Beneath it, the photo of them in Santorini was gone, replaced by a framed selfie of Alistair and Clara on a yacht. Eleanor didn't touch it. She just stared. "I didn't come here to gloat," she said quietly. "I came to remind you both of a truth you forgot. This house wasn't built on your name, Alistair. It was built on loyalty, sacrifice, and women like me who loved you enough to hold it together while you chased illusions." She turned back, holding up the envelope. "The deed is filed. The staff has already been notified they'll keep their jobs. But you," she looked at Clara, "you don't belong here. And you—" Her eyes met Alistair's, and for a heartbeat, grief flickered beneath the steel. "You chose to leave. So leave." Alistair didn't move. He just stared at her. The woman he'd dismissed, the ghost he'd tried to erase, and saw, for the first time, not a relic of his past, but the architect of his future. And the terrifying truth settled over him like a shroud. She hadn't come back for him. She'd come back for herself. Outside, a black town car idled at the gate. Same one that had taken her away. But this time, it wasn't fleeing. It was waiting for them to go. And as Clara stormed upstairs in tears and Alistair stood paralyzed in the foyer, she wore emerald silk, the same shade Eleanor used to wear to board meetings, and laughed too loudly at every joke, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds, as if expecting disaster to walk in. Alistair sat at the head of the table, silent, swirling whiskey in a tumbler he hadn't touched. His suit was pressed, his hair combed, but his gaze was hollow. He kept glancing at the empty chair to his right, the one Eleanor always occupied during formal dinners. The one she'd once said was the only place I ever felt seen. "Darling?" Clara cooed, leaning close. "Smile. They're watching." He didn't answer. Then the front door chime. Not the staff entrance. Not the side gate. The main door. The one reserved for guests of consequence. Clara stiffened. Who on earth? Before the butler could announce, the doors to the dining room swung open. Eleanor stood there, not in morning black, not in armor, but in a tailored ivory suit, hair loose, eyes calm as deep water. In one hand, she held a leather folio. In the other, a single key, the master key to Blackthorn Manor, forged in 1892, passed down through generations. She didn't speak. She simply walked in, heels echoing like a metronome counting down to truth. Every guest rose instinctively. Even the investors, men who'd dismissed her for years as just the wife, recognized the shift in the air. Power had changed hands, and it wore her face. Clara shot to her feet, voice shrill. "You can't just barge in here. This is a private—" "It's my house," Eleanor said softly, "which makes this my private dinner." She turned to the butler, who stood frozen. "Thomas, would you be so kind as to bring an extra chair? I believe I'm expected." Thomas, loyal Thomas, who'd wept when she left, nodded quickly and scurried off. Alistair finally stood. "Eleanor, what is this?" She met his eyes. Closure. She walked to the head of the table, the place he'd always claimed as his birthright, and placed the folio down with deliberate grace. Then, without asking, she took the seat to his right. Her seat. Clara sputtered. "This is absurd. You have no right." "I have every right," Eleanor said, voice rising just enough to cut through the tension. "Because as of this morning, Blackthorn Holdings is under new management. The Viridian Trust has assumed full control. And I," she paused, letting the words sink in, "am its sole beneficiary." One of the investors, an old man with silver brows, leaned forward. "Lady Blackthorn, are you saying you've taken over the estate?" "I'm saying I never left it," she replied. "I just stepped out of the shadows long enough for you all to see who was really holding it up." Alistair's hands clenched. "You humiliate me in front of my peers?" "No," she said, turning to him, voice cracking with raw honesty. "I'm giving you the chance to see yourself clearly. You thought Clara was your future, but she's just a mirror reflecting back the man you wish you were. I was the ground beneath your feet, and you kicked me away like dirt." Clara stood, trembling. "You think you've won? He'll never love you again. Not after this." Eleanor looked at her, not with anger but pity. "I don't want his love, Clara. I want his respect. And more than that, I want my home back." She opened the folio. Inside, signed documents, bank confirmations, and a single photograph of her father shaking hands with Alistair's grandfather, the original loan agreement that saved Blackthorn from ruin in 1952. This family survived because women like me believed in it, even when the men forgot how. She stood, addressing the room. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming. The Blackthorn legacy continues, but under new terms. Transparency, integrity, and no more secrets." Her eyes flicked to Clara. "And no more mistresses masquerading as executives." Clara grabbed her purse, face burning. "Alistair, are you just going to let her?" He didn't look at her. He was staring at Eleanor, at the woman who'd returned not for revenge, but for restoration. And in that silence, Clara knew she'd already lost. She stormed out, heels clattering like a retreat. The room fell still. Then, slowly, the eldest investor raised his glass. "To Lady Blackthorn," he said, "the true heir." One by one, they followed. Eleanor didn't smile. She just nodded, then turned to Alistair, who hadn't moved. "You can stay," she said quietly, "but not as the master, as a guest, if you choose to earn that." He swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" Eleanor stood by the French doors, arms crossed. watching the moonlight ripple across the lake at the edge of the garden. She hadn't changed, hadn't removed her jacket, as if she were still bracing for battle. Footsteps, slow, hesitant. Alistair stopped a few feet behind her. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, breathing the same air she had once begged him to share. "You could have ruined me publicly," he finally said, voice rough. "You had every right, but you didn't." "I didn't come back to destroy you," she replied without turning. "I came back to remind you what you threw away." He stepped closer. "I thought I was choosing freedom, a fresh start, someone who made me feel seen." Eleanor let out a quiet, aching laugh. "Clara didn't see you, Alistair. She saw the title, the fortune, the illusion. I saw the man who cried in the library after his brother died. The man who couldn't sign condolence letters because his hands shook too much. The man who whispered, 'I'm not enough,' into my hair the night your father cut you off." She turned then, eyes glistening. "That's who I loved. Not the Lord, the man." He flinched as if struck. "Then why are you doing this? Kicking me out of my own home? Your home?" She shook her head, voice trembling with restrained fury. "You stopped treating it like a home the moment you let her sleep in our bed. You turned it into a trophy, a stage. But this house, it's always been a sanctuary, for the staff who depend on it, for the history that lives in these walls. For me." She stepped forward, closing the distance. "You asked me once what I wanted. Do you remember?" He swallowed. "You said peace, and you gave me silence instead," she whispered. "There's a difference." A long pause. The clock in the hall ticked. Once, twice, 3 times. "I'm sorry," he said. And for the first time, it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded broken. Not just for Clara, for everything. For never thanking you. For never seeing how much you carried. Eleanor's breath hitched. She wanted to soften. God, she wanted to. But the woman who left in the rain couldn't afford to melt now. "Sorry doesn't rebuild trust, Alistair," she said softly. "And it doesn't erase the fact that you chose her over me, over us, without a second thought." "I was blind," he admitted, voice cracking. "But I see now. You're not just the woman who kept the lights on. You are the light." She looked away, blinking fast. "Don't make me the hero in your redemption story. I'm just trying to survive mine." He reached out, then stopped himself. "Can I stay? Not as your husband. Not even as the owner. Just as someone who's learning how to be worthy of this place again." Eleanor studied him. The shadows under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly, the absence of arrogance that used to armor him like steel. "You can stay," she said finally. "On 3 conditions." He nodded eagerly. "Anything. 1, you work. No more lounging while others carry your weight. You'll oversee the vineyard restoration hands-on. Dirt under your nails. 2, you never speak Clara's name in this house again. Not in anger, not in longing. She's gone. And 3, she met his eyes unflinching. You apologize to every person you hurt while chasing her. Starting with Thomas. He cried when I left, Alistair, because he thought you'd finally broken me." Alistair's shoulders slumped. Not in defeat, but in acceptance. "I will." She turned back to the window. "Then your room is the East guest suite, not the master. That's mine now." He didn't argue, just nodded. "Thank you." "For what?" she asked, voice barely audible. "For giving me a chance to earn back the man you once believed I could be." Silence settled between them. Not the heavy silence of before, but something fragile, tender, like the first breath after a storm. Thomas hesitated. "She's holding an envelope. Says it's mutually beneficial." A cold ripple ran down Eleanor's spine. She set her pen down slowly. "Show her to the morning room, and send for Alistair." "No, wait." She paused. "Don't tell him she's here. Not yet." The morning room, once her favorite place for tea and quiet thought, now felt like a cage. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, catching dust motes in the air. Clara stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, wearing a sharp black coat that screamed, I still matter. You look well, Clara said, voice dripping with false warmth. Power suits you. Get to the point, Eleanor said, closing the door behind her. Clara smiled, stepping forward. I know what you did. The trust, the debt payoff, the backdoor clauses, you played this beautifully. But Alistair's not the only one with leverage. She pulled a slim file from her bag. I have copies of every transfer he authorized to my offshore accounts. Signed, dated, with his seal. Eleanor's pulse quickened, but she kept her face calm. And if those go public, Clara said, leaning in, it doesn't just ruin him, it implicates you, because you were CFO in all but title. Regulators will ask why you didn't report it, why you let him bleed the estate dry while you sat quietly in your study. Eleanor let out a slow breath. You think I'm afraid of scrutiny? No, Clara said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I think you're afraid of losing what you just got back. So here's my offer, $2 million, quietly, into an account of my choosing. And these documents disappear forever. Eleanor stared at her, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Pity. You really don't understand, do you? She said softly. I didn't fight to keep a secret. I fought to end them. She walked to the window, then turned. You see, Clara, while you were busy collecting Alistair's promises, I was collecting proof. Every transfer you mentioned, I logged them, tracked them, even helped route some. So I'd have a paper trail you couldn't deny. She smiled faintly. You didn't just sign his name on those accounts. You signed your own confession. Clara's confidence faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Eleanor pulled a tablet from the side table and tapped the screen. Up came a secure portal, Geneva Financial Oversight. She scrolled to a flagged case. Blackthorn Holdings, suspicious transactions, whistleblower file E. Blackthorn. Clara paled. You reported yourself? I reported him, Eleanor corrected, and named you as the beneficiary. The investigation's already underway. But here's the twist. Because I disclosed it before they came knocking, I'm protected. You're the accomplice. Clara's hands shook. You'd destroy him just to ruin me? No, Eleanor said, voice breaking with sudden, raw emotion. I'd protect this house, even if it meant exposing the man I once loved. Because this isn't about him anymore. It's about truth. And you built your future on lies. She stepped closer. Leave, now. And if I ever see you near this estate again, I won't just send you to prison. I'll make sure the world knows exactly who you are. A woman who traded dignity for a man who never loved her. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Not of remorse, but of fury. She shoved the file onto the table. You think you've won? He'll never truly choose you over the life he knew. He already did, Eleanor said quietly. The moment he stayed. Clara stormed out, heels clattering like gunfire. Eleanor sank into the armchair, trembling. She hadn't told Alistair about the whistleblower file. Hadn't told anyone, because some battles had to be fought alone. But as she stared at the empty fireplace, she heard footsteps in the hall. Alistair stood in the doorway, face ashen. He must have overheard. You knew, he whispered. All this time, you knew about the transfers. Eleanor met his gaze. I knew, and I gave you a chance to come clean. You didn't. He walked in, voice cracking. Why didn't you expose me? Because I hoped you'd find your way back on your own, she said. Not out of fear, but out of honor. He dropped to his knees before her, not in submission, but in surrender. Lord Blackthorn is in the vineyard, he said quietly. He's been there since dawn, barefoot, in the mud. Eleanor's pen stilled. He's supposed to be overseeing the replanting crew. He sent them home, Thomas replied. Said he needed to do it himself, by hand. She stood without a word, slipping on a light coat and walking through the gardens toward the southern slope where the vines climbed in neat, wounded rows, many still scarred from neglect. And there he was, Alistair, kneeling in the damp earth, shirt soaked, hands caked in soil, carefully pruning dead branches from a young Cabernet Sauvignon. His movements were slow, deliberate, nothing like the impatient gestures of the man who once signed million-pound deals without reading them. She stopped a few yards away, watching. He didn't look up. "I forgot how much this place gives," he said, voice rough. "Even when we take and never thank it." Eleanor stepped closer. "You're not pruning. You're apologizing." He finally turned, eyes red-rimmed, not from tears, but from sleepless nights. "I dreamed of Clara last night," he admitted. "Not with longing, with shame. I saw her face when you showed her the truth, and I realized I never loved her. I just loved the idea that someone could want me without knowing my flaws." Eleanor sat on a nearby stone bench, the morning dew soaking through her skirt. "And what do you want now?" "To be worthy of this," he said, gesturing to the land, the house, the sky. "Of you." She looked away. "I'm not a prize to be won back, Alistair." "I know," he said quickly. "That's the point. I don't want to win you. I want to earn you, day by day, even if it takes the rest of my life." Silence stretched between them, filled only by birdsong and the rustle of leaves. Then, quietly, "Do you remember our first harvest together? 10 years ago? You got dirt in your hair and laughed like you'd never been happier." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I remember. I forgot that joy," he whispered. "I traded it for power, for control. But control is an illusion. Joy is real." He stood, brushing soil from his knees, and walked toward her. "Not too close, just close enough." "I read the whistleblower file," he said. "The one you submitted. You listed every transaction, but you omitted your own name from the liability section. You shielded me, even when I didn't deserve it." "I shielded the estate," she corrected. "Not you. But it's the same thing now, isn't it?" he asked, voice breaking. "Because you are Blackthorn Manor, Eleanor. Not the bricks, not the title. Your integrity, your resilience, your quiet, unshakable love for what's good here." She looked at him then, really looked. Not at the Lord, not at the husband who failed her, but at the man trying, clumsily, painfully, to become someone better. "What if I can't trust you again?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Then I'll keep showing up," he said. "In the mud, in the rain, in silence, until the day you do, or until the day I prove I never will." A breeze swept through the vines, carrying the scent of earth and new growth. Eleanor stood. She didn't touch him, but she didn't walk away. "Tomorrow," she said, "the restoration team begins work on the old chapel. It's been empty for decades. I thought we could turn it into a community space for women who've lost their way, like I almost did." Alistair's eyes filled. "You'd let me help? If you're willing to listen more than you speak," she said. "And if you understand, this isn't about us rebuilding a marriage. It's about rebuilding something honest." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll bring the tools." She turned to leave but paused. "Alistair." "Yes." "Wash your hands before dinner. You're tracking mud into the house." For the first time in months he smiled. A real one, small and tender. "Yes, my lady." And as she walked back toward the manor, Eleanor felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. "Not hope for them," she clicked. The article was brutal, sourced from anonymous financial regulators, detailing Alistair's unauthorized transfers, Clara's shell companies, and the near collapse of the estate. Worse, it quoted a close associate claiming Eleanor had enabled the fraud for years to maintain her lifestyle. Within minutes, her phone lit up. Reporters, old society friends, even distant cousins she hadn't spoken to in decades. But before she could react, Alistair burst into the chapel, breathless, eyes wild. "They're dragging your name through the mud," he said, voice raw. "I just saw the headline. I didn't authorize any leaks." "I know you didn't," Eleanor said calmly, though her hands trembled. "But someone did, and they made sure I took the fall with you." He ran a hand through his hair. "Clara, it has to be. She's desperate, humiliated. Or it's someone who never wanted us to rebuild," Eleanor murmured. Someone who profits from our ruin. Just then, Thomas appeared in the doorway, face grim. Lady Blackthorn, Miss Clara is outside. She's demanding to speak with you. Says she has proof someone else leaked the documents. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Alistair. Let her in. Clara entered like a storm. Hair disheveled, eyes blazing, clutching a manila envelope. No designer coat this time. Just a worn trench and the look of a woman who'd lost everything. You think I did this? She snapped before Eleanor could speak. I buried those files. I had everything to lose. Then who? Alistair asked sharply. Clara threw the envelope onto the chapel's wooden table. Your uncle, Lord Reginald. Eleanor froze. Reginald? He's been in Switzerland for years. Convenient, isn't it? Clara said bitterly. But I got a call this morning from a journalist who said his source used a Geneva number traced to Reginald's private office. And look, she pulled out a printed email chain. He's been contacting creditors, offering to buy Blackthorn assets at fire sale prices. After the scandal tanks your value, Alistair's face darkened. He always hated that father left the estate to me, called me reckless, unworthy. He doesn't want the estate, Eleanor realized aloud. He wants to dismantle it, piece by piece, and he's using us to do it. Silence fell over the chapel. Once a place of prayer, now a battlefield of truth. Clara looked at Eleanor, voice quieter now. I didn't come to beg. I came because I finally understand. I was a pawn, just like you were. He probably encouraged Alistair to take me on, knowing it would destabilize you. Eleanor studied her. Why help us now? Because I have nothing left, Clara admitted, tears welling. No money, no reputation, but I still have my name. And if Reginald thinks he can use me to destroy you, he's wrong. She met Eleanor's eyes. Let me help expose him. I have contacts in the press. I can turn this narrative. Alistair scoffed. After everything you've done? Alistair, Eleanor said softly. Sometimes the people who hurt us are the only ones who know how to help us heal. She turned to Clara. What do you need? Clara took a shaky breath. A recorded confession. Reginald's arrogant. He'll gloat if we give him the right bait. Eleanor nodded. Then we set a trap. That night, under the cover of rain, they gathered in the library, Eleanor, Alistair, Clara, and Sebastian on a secure video line from Geneva. They drafted a fake email. Eleanor agrees to sell Blackthorn Holdings to Reginald at 30% below market, contingent on immediate cash transfer. Within hours, Reginald replied, Meet me at the estate tomorrow. I'll bring the papers. And don't be late. This family has suffered enough under your mismanagement. Eleanor read the message aloud, then looked at Alistair. He still sees me as the intruder. No, Alistair said, stepping closer. He sees you as the threat, because you're the one who actually loves this place. The next day, hidden microphones lined the library. Reginald arrived in a sleek black car, smug, umbrella in hand, unaware the staff had been instructed to stay silent. He strutted in, eyeing Eleanor with disdain. So, the little bookkeeper finally admits she's in over her head. I'm not selling, Eleanor said, standing tall. But I needed to hear you say it yourself. Reginald frowned. Say what? That you orchestrated this? Alistair stepped forward, voice cold. That you fed the press. That you used Clara. That you wanted to watch me fall so you could pick the bones. Reginald laughed. A dry, cruel sound. And if I did, who's going to stop me? You, the disgraced lord? Or her? He gestured to Eleanor. The wife who couldn't keep her husband? Then, from the doorway, Clara appeared, holding up her phone, recording light glowing red. Me, she said. Reginald's face drained of color. Eleanor walked to the window and opened it wide. Outside, two journalists from the Financial Chronicle, ones Clara had quietly tipped off, stood waiting. Your move, uncle, Alistair said. As Reginald sputtered, Eleanor felt not triumph, but relief. The truth was out. He found her there just past midnight, barefoot in the mud again, holding 2 steaming mugs. "You'll catch cold," he said softly, offering one. She took it but didn't look at him. "I've survived worse." He leaned against the stone pillar beside her, shoulders hunched against the wind. "I keep replaying everything. Every time I dismissed you, every time I chose pride over truth. And I wonder, if I just listened, none of this would have happened." Eleanor stared into the dark. "You can't rewrite the past, Alistair." "No," he admitted, "but I can change what comes next." She finally turned to him. Rain glistened in his hair, his lashes, the hollow of his throat. He looked exhausted, human, real. "Why are you really here?" she asked, voice barely above the storm. He set his mug down and faced her fully. "Because I need you to know something. Before the lawyers finalize the trust restructuring. Before the world decides who we are again." He took a breath. "I don't want you back because I'm alone, or because the house feels empty, or because Clara's gone and Reginald's exposed and I have nowhere else to turn." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the chill. "I want you back because when I stood in that vineyard, covered in dirt, I finally understood. I never lost you. I let you go. And that was the greatest failure of my life." Eleanor's chest tightened. "You hurt me, Alistair, deeply, and trust isn't rebuilt in a single conversation." "I know," he whispered, "but I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed. Not with grand gestures, not with promises, but with silence when you need it, with showing up even when you don't ask, with remembering that your strength isn't a threat to my pride. It's the foundation of everything I want to be." Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. "What if I say no? Then I'll still stay," he said without hesitation. "Not as your husband, not as the lord of this house, but as the man who finally sees you and loves you, not despite your power, but because of it." She looked away, heart pounding. The woman who left in the rain would have walked away. But the woman standing here now, she wanted more than survival. She wanted truth, even if it terrified her. "Alistair," she said slowly, turning back, "do you want me? Or do you just want back what I built for you?" The question hung between them like lightning before the strike. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. "I want you," he said, voice breaking. "Not the estate manager, not Lady Blackthorne, not the woman who saved my name. Just Eleanor, the one who cries when she thinks no one's watching, the one who remembers the gardener's daughter's birthday, the one who still keeps lavender sachets in the guest rooms because she believes in small kindnesses." He reached out slowly and brushed a rain-soaked strand of hair from her face. His touch was tentative, reverent. "I don't need you to fix me," he whispered. "I need you to let me stand beside you while I fix myself." For a long moment, she said nothing. The rain fell, the wind howled, and inside her, a war raged between memory and hope. Then, softly, "Stay," his breath caught. "What? Stay?" she repeated, meeting his eyes. "Not in the guest suite, in the house, in my life, but not as you were, as you're becoming." Relief flooded his face. So raw, so vulnerable, it made her ache. He didn't kiss her, didn't embrace her. He simply nodded, eyes shining. "Thank you," he whispered. And as they stood together beneath the storm, 2 broken people learning to hold space for each other's healing, Eleanor realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. "I am," she replied, "but not against you, against the past." He nodded, handing her a folder. The staff petition. Every single one signed it, asking to keep their jobs, their homes, their dignity. "They believe in what you're building." She touched the cover gently. "They believed in me before I believed in myself." Just then, Thomas appeared, face unreadable. "Miss Clara is here, my lady. She says it's urgent." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Alistair. "Show her in." Clara entered not with arrogance, but with quiet resolve. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, and carried a single leather satchel. "I came to return this," she said, placing a key on the hall table. The key to Alistair's private study, the one she'd used to access his ledgers weeks ago. And to say, "I'm leaving London." Eleanor didn't soften. Good. But Clara didn't leave. She looked at Alistair, then back at Eleanor. "Before I go, I need you to know I've accepted a position at a women's shelter in Bristol. The kind of place you're building here." She swallowed. "You showed me that redemption isn't about erasing who you were. It's about becoming someone who makes amends." Eleanor studied her, saw not the schemer, but the girl who'd been used just like she had. "Then go do good, Clara. And don't look back." Clara nodded, eyes glistening. "Thank you for not letting me become the villain I almost was." As she turned to leave, Eleanor called after her. "Clara." She paused. "If you ever need a reference, you know where to find me." A faint smile touched Clara's lips. Then she was gone. Alistair exhaled. "I never thought I'd feel sorry for her." "Neither did I," Eleanor admitted. "But pain connects us, even when we don't want it to." Later that afternoon, in the newly restored library, now lined with books on law, finance, and women's rights, Eleanor addressed the board. Alistair stood slightly behind her, not as her superior, but as her witness. She laid out her vision. Blackthorn Manor would remain a private residence. Yes, but also a sanctuary. Half the East Wing would become a center for women rebuilding after abandonment, abuse, or betrayal. The vineyards would employ single mothers. Profits would fund scholarships. One elderly board member frowned. "This isn't tradition, Lady Blackthorn." "No," she said calmly. "It's evolution. And if this estate is to survive, it must serve more than just a name. It must serve a purpose." Silence. Then, one by one, they nodded. After the vote, unanimous, Eleanor walked to the window. Alistair joined her. "You did it," he said. "We did," she corrected. "Because you chose to stand with me, not above me." That evening, as staff prepared the first community dinner in the old dining room, now with mismatched chairs and laughter instead of silence, Eleanor stood in the garden, watching fireflies rise over the lake. Alistair came beside her, holding 2 glasses of wine from the newly replanted vines. "They're calling it Eleanor's redemption," he said with a small smile. She shook her head. "It's not redemption, it's reclamation." He handed her a glass. "What's the difference?" "Redemption means I was wrong," she said softly. "Reclamation means I was always right, and finally brave enough to say so." He raised his glass. "To the woman who saved Blackthorn by refusing to disappear." She clinked hers against his. "To the man who finally saw her." And as the sun dipped below the hills, casting the manor in amber light, Eleanor knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning built not on power, but on truth. Not on possession, but on partnership. And for the first time in her life, she owned not just a house, but her own story. Alistair hadn't worn a suit in weeks. He stood in the vineyard at dawn, breath fogging in the cold air, hands raw from pruning, knees damp from kneeling in the frozen earth. He'd taken a job, not a title, not an honorific, but real work, as assistant manager of the estate's agricultural operations. The staff no longer called him "my lord." They called him Mr. Blackthorn. And sometimes, when he brought extra firewood to the Haven Wing or stayed late to fix a leaky faucet, they simply said, "Thanks, Alistair." He didn't correct them. He earned it. One afternoon, Eleanor found him in the tool shed, sharpening shears, his coat patched at the elbow. "You missed the board meeting," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "I know," he replied without looking up. "I was helping Marta move her daughter into the East Cottage. Her ex showed up last night, shouting, threatening. She needed someone to stand between her and the past." Eleanor watched him, this man who once signed deals without reading them, now measuring soil pH with calloused hands. "You could have sent a guard." "I am the guard now," he said quietly. "Just not the kind I used to be." She stepped inside, the scent of oil and wood surrounding them. "The investors are impressed. They say the estate's valuation has risen 20% since the Haven opened." He finally looked at her. I don't care about valuation. I care about Marta sleeping through the night, about young Lila learning to read in the library you rebuilt, about the fact that this place finally feels like it's for someone, not just owned by someone. Eleanor's throat tightened. You've changed. No, he said, setting the shears down. I've just remembered who I was before the title swallowed me. He walked to her, snow dusting his shoulders. Do you remember what you said the night I came back from the rain? You can stay, but not as the master. As a guest. Well, I'm not a guest anymore. Her breath caught. What are you? A man learning to be useful, he said, voice rough with emotion. Not because I want your forgiveness, but because I finally understand. Dignity isn't inherited. It's earned. One honest day at a time. Outside, a raven called from the bare oak, the same tree where he'd once proposed, drunk on champagne and certainty. Now, he stood before her with nothing but dirt under his nails and truth in his eyes. Eleanor reached out, brushing snow from his sleeve. You're not the same man who kicked me out. And you're not the same woman who left, he whispered. You came back not to reclaim a marriage, but to build something better. And I just wanted to be worthy of standing in the shadow of what you created. She didn't pull away. Then keep working. Keep showing up. Not for me. For you. He nodded. I will. As they walked back toward the manor together, side by side but not touching, Eleanor felt something shift. Not between them, but within her. The fear that he'd revert, that power would corrupt him again. It hadn't vanished, but it no longer ruled her, because actions spoke louder than apologies. And Alistair's hands, once used to sign away her worth, were now used to build a future where no woman would ever feel as invisible as she once had. That night, from her window, she watched him carry firewood to the Haven wing, his silhouette strong against the winter dusk. Then, one rainy Tuesday, a plain envelope appeared on her desk. No return address, just her name, written in a hand she hadn't seen in months. Her breath caught. She opened it slowly. Inside, a single sheet of thick cream paper and a check. The amount made her blink. Pound 250,000. Anonymous. But in the bottom corner, a small, familiar symbol. The Blackthorn family crest, sketched in pencil. Beneath it, a note. Eleanor, this isn't repayment. It's respect. Use it to keep building what I was too blind to see. Her hands trembled. Not from shock, but from the weight of what this meant. He hadn't signed his full name, hadn't asked for acknowledgement, hadn't even requested a meeting. He'd simply given quietly, humbly, the kind of gesture that couldn't be faked. She found him an hour later in the West Orchard, pruning apple trees, his back to the path. She didn't call out, just walked up beside him, holding the envelope. He froze when he saw it, didn't turn. You didn't have to come. I wanted to, she said softly. Why anonymous? He set his shears down, wiping his hands on his trousers. Because if I'd signed it, it would have felt like I was trying to buy your approval, or rewrite the past. He finally looked at her, eyes clear, unguarded. That money, it's from the sale of my London flat, the one I kept after everything. I don't need it, but the Haven does. She studied him, the lines around his eyes deeper now, his hair slightly longer, his posture less rigid. He wasn't performing. He was simply being. You could have kept it, she said. Started over somewhere else. And go where? He asked with a faint, sad smile. Every place I've been since you left just felt like waiting to come back here. Not to you, to this. He gestured to the orchard, the manor beyond, the distant sound of children laughing from the Haven. This is the only home I've ever truly had, and I only found it when I stopped pretending to own it. Rain began to fall, soft, warm drops that kissed their faces like a blessing. Eleanor stepped closer. You wrote respect. Why that word? Because I finally understand, he said, voice thick. You didn't need my love to survive. You needed my respect to be seen. And I denied you that for years. He looked down. I can't undo that, But I can spend every day proving I see you now. Not as my wife, not as my savior, but as Eleanor. The woman who rebuilt a legacy not with vengeance, but with grace. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. It's a lot of money, Alistair. It's not enough, he said simply. But it's a start. She folded the note carefully and tucked it into her coat pocket, next to her heart. I'll use it to fund the legal aid program for women like Marta, like I was. He nodded, relief softening his features. Good. They stood in silence as the rain fell, the orchard blooming around them. Then, quietly, "Do you ever regret staying?" he asked. She turned to him, really looked at him, the man who'd shattered her, then spent months quietly gathering the pieces, not to put her back together, but to help her build something new. "No," she said, "because staying wasn't about you. It was about me choosing to believe I deserved more than silence, more than erasure." She touched his arm just once. "And you chose to become someone worthy of sharing that space." He didn't smile, didn't reach for her. He just nodded, eyes glistening. And in that rain-soaked orchard, two souls who'd once destroyed each other stood side by side. Not healed, not whole, but trying. And sometimes that was the bravest thing of all. Later, as she walked back to the manor, Eleanor paused at the garden gate. She pulled the note from her pocket. Again, rereading those 3 words, "This is respect." For the first time, she believed he meant it. And for the first time, she let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, love could grow in the soil of honesty, even after betrayal. But she wouldn't rush it. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Her fingers trembled as she untied the string. Inside, a single sheet of paper, folded once. No envelope, no signature, just words, written in ink that bled slightly at the edges, as if written late at night, in haste or in tears. Asterisk Eleanor, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to remember the sound of my voice without bitterness. But I need you to know I was wrong. Not just about Clara. Not just about the money. About everything. I thought love was possession. That loyalty meant obedience. That a wife's silence was a gift, not a sacrifice. You taught me, through your absence, through your return, through your refusal to become what I made you, that love is witness. Is seeing someone fully, scars and strength alike, and choosing to stand beside them anyway. I don't want you back as my wife. I want you to know I see you now, as you always were, whole, fierce, and never mine to begin with. If you ever feel like speaking, not as Lady Blackthorn, not as the woman who saved this house, but as Eleanor, just Eleanor, I'll be at the old boathouse on the lake. Not to ask for anything, just to listen. Hey. Asterisk, she read it 3 times. The 4th time, tears blurred the ink. She didn't go that day, or the next, but on the 3rd evening, as the sun bled gold across the water, she walked down the winding path to the boathouse. The same one where they'd shared their first kiss years ago, before titles, before betrayal, before silence became their language. He was there, sitting on the dock, legs dangling over the edge, wearing a simple sweater, no shoes. He didn't turn when she approached, just kept watching the ripples spread across the lake. "You came," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," she admitted, stopping a few feet behind him. "I know." She sat beside him, not too close, but not distant. The wood was warm from the sun, the air sweet with water lilies. "You didn't sign your name on the letter," she said. "I didn't feel I had the right," he replied. "Not after everything." She looked at him, really looked. The pride that once armored him was gone. In its place, humility, quiet strength. A man who'd been stripped bare and chosen to rebuild, not with grand declarations, but with daily acts of decency. "Why now?" she asked. "After all this time?" "Because I realized something," he said, voice low. "I've been waiting for you to give me permission to be near you again. But maybe I needed to give myself permission to be honest." He turned to her. "I don't want us to be husband and wife again. I want us to be 2 people who choose each other every day without expectation." Her breath caught. That's a lot of trust. It's all I have to offer, he said. No titles, no legacy, just me, flawed, trying, present. She looked out at the lake, where their reflections shimmered, broken and whole at once. Alistair, she said slowly, if we talk, it can't be about rekindling what was. It has to be about building something new, something real. I know, he said, and if you say no, I'll walk away. Not because I don't care, but because I finally understand. Your peace is more important than my longing. She was silent for a long time. The water lapped gently against the dock. A heron took flight in the distance. Then, softly, tell me about your day. He blinked, surprised. My day? Yes, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. Not your regrets, not your grand gestures, just your day. He exhaled, shoulders relaxing. I helped Lila fix her bicycle this morning. She wanted to ride to the market. Then I met with the vineyard crew new irrigation system. And in the afternoon, I sat with Marta while she wrote her first job application in 10 years. He looked at her. It was a good day. She nodded. It sounds like it. And for the first time in years, they talked. Not as lord and lady, not as exiles from a broken marriage, but as two human beings, meeting in the quiet space between past and future. No promises were made, no vows renewed, but as the stars began to pierce the twilight, Eleanor didn't leave, and Alistair didn't ask her to stay. They simply sat, side by side, watching the water hold the sky, but Eleanor still slept in the east wing, Alistair in the west guest suite. No doors were locked between them, only choices honored. Then came the morning of the Haven's first anniversary. The garden was strung with fairy lights, tables laden with food, children chasing butterflies through lavender rows. Former guests, now mentors, advocates, friends, embraced Eleanor like family. She moved among them, radiant not in jewels, but in purpose. Alistair watched from the edge of the crowd, holding a tray of lemonade, his heart full in a way he'd never known. He wasn't the center of attention, and for the first time he didn't need to be. Later, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in rose and amber, Eleanor found him by the old stone bench, the one where he'd left the letter. You've been quiet, she said, sitting beside him. I was just thinking, he replied, voice soft. A year ago, I stood in this garden and told you I wanted to earn the right to stay. And today, I watched a woman who once slept in a shelter lead a workshop on financial independence. All because you refused to disappear. He turned to her. You didn't just save this house, Eleanor. You gave it a soul. She looked down, fingers tracing the bench's weathered edge. I couldn't have done it alone. You didn't have to, he said, but you could have. And that's what makes it yours. A breeze stirred the trees, carrying the scent of jasmine and wood smoke. Then, quietly, I've been offered a position in Edinburgh, he said. Her head snapped up. What? A non-profit, supporting men rebuilding after addiction, after loss, after becoming someone they don't recognize. He met her eyes. It's 6 months, maybe a year. They need someone who's been through the fire and chose to walk out, not burn the world down. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with the sudden, sharp understanding that this was his next step. Not away from her, but toward himself. You're going, she said. It wasn't a question. I want to, he admitted. Not to escape, to grow, and to prove to myself that I can be useful beyond these walls. She nodded slowly. You should go. He searched her face. Does that mean? It means I trust you, she said, voice steady despite the ache. Not because you've earned it, though you have, but because I finally trust myself enough to let you go, without fearing you'll forget me. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. His palm was rough from work, warm from the sun. I could never forget you, Eleanor, he said. You're the compass I lost, and the one who taught me how to find true north again. Tears welled, but she didn't look away. Then go, do good, and when you're ready, come back. Not because you have to, But because you want to. He squeezed her hand. And if I don't come back? Then I'll know you found your peace elsewhere, she said softly. And I'll be glad for you. They sat in silence as twilight deepened, hands still joined, not as lovers, not as exes, but as two souls who'd walked through fire and emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights were dimmed, Eleanor walked alone through the garden. She stopped at the lake's edge, where fireflies danced over the water like scattered stars. She didn't cry, she breathed, because for the first time, her happiness didn't depend on someone staying. It depended on her standing firm, free, and finally whole. And as the moon rose over Blackthorn Manor, the house didn't feel like a monument to the past. It felt like a promise for the future. She rarely spoke of him, but sometimes, on quiet evenings, she'd find herself walking to the lake, standing where they'd last sat together, wondering if distance had healed him, or if it had simply carried him away. Then, one late October afternoon, as she reviewed grant applications in the sunroom, Thomas appeared in the doorway, holding a letter. "He's back, my lady," he said softly. "Waiting by the east gate. Didn't want to disturb you." Her pen stilled. Her heart didn't race, it simply opened. She found him beneath the old oak, the one that had witnessed proposals and goodbyes alike. He looked different. Leaner, quieter, his eyes holding a calm she'd never seen before. He wore a simple coat, no luggage, just a worn satchel slung over his shoulder. "You came back," she said, stopping a few feet away. "I finished the program," he replied. "Helped launch a sister initiative in Glasgow." But he looked at her, really looked. "I realized something while I was gone. I can build shelters for broken men all over the world, but none of them will ever feel like home unless I'm honest about where mine is." She crossed her arms, not in defense, but in caution. "And where is that?" "Here," he said without hesitation. "Not because of the house, not because of the name, but because of you, not as my wife, not as my redemption, just as the woman who taught me that dignity isn't taken. It's given freely to yourself first." He stepped closer, but didn't touch her. "I'm not asking for anything, Eleanor. Not a room, not a title, just a chance to be near you, to keep learning, to keep showing up, even if it's just as a friend." She studied him, the absence of pride, the presence of peace. This wasn't the man who'd thrown her out in the rain. This was someone forged in humility, tempered by service. "And if I say no?" she asked. "Then I'll leave tonight," he said, "and I'll carry what you've given me. The truth that I'm enough, even when I fail, wherever I go." She looked past him, to the manor glowing in the amber light, to the haven wing where laughter drifted through open windows. This place was hers, not because she owned the deed, but because she'd poured her soul into its stones. Then she turned back to him. "Your old room in the west wing is still empty," she said quietly. "But if you stay, you'll work. You'll listen. You'll never assume your presence is owed." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he said, voice thick. She nodded. "Then stay." He didn't smile, didn't embrace her. He simply exhaled, as if he'd been holding his breath for 6 months, and said, "Thank you." That evening, as dusk settled like a blessing, they walked together through the garden. Not hand in hand, but side by side, shoulders almost touching. The wind carried the last of the season's roses, and somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. Eleanor stopped at the lake's edge, watching the water mirror the sky. "You know," she said softly, "the title said you kicked me out for your mistress, and I returned as the mansion's new owner." Alistair looked at her. "And what did it really mean?" She turned to him, eyes clear, heart open. "It meant that true ownership isn't about deeds or names. It's about who has the courage to walk away, and the strength to come back, not to reclaim power, but to offer peace." He held her gaze. "And us? We're still writing that chapter," she said. "One honest day at a time." Above them, the first stars blinked awake, and in the quiet of Blackthorn Manor, no longer a monument to legacy, but a living testament to resilience, Two souls who'd once shattered each other chose, gently, to rebuild. Not as Lord and Lady, but as Eleanor and Alistair. Flawed, forgiven,